Welcome to the Real Talk with Megan podcast, where we have candid conversations about the things that matter most. I'm your host, Megan, and we're going to deep dive into the topic of mental health. In a world where we're constantly pressured to perform, achieve, and excel, it's easy to neglect our mental health. But the truth is, mental health is just as important as physical health, and it's time we started treating it as such. Join the conversation as we explore the complexities of mental health issues and speak with experts, advocates, and individuals who have lived through these challenges. Together, we'll work to destigmatize mental health and start conversations. So sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and get ready for a real and raw conversation about mental health on the Real Talk with Megan podcast. Let me just start with this. Anxiety sucks. Period. There you have it. Shortest podcast ever. Okay, well, maybe not. Let's dive in a little bit. I grew up in the 90s and the early 2000s. If you grew up around this time, or maybe even before this, you probably will understand what I'm getting ready to talk about. Anxiety was a taboo topic. If it was talked about at all, it was usually lumped in with depression. I understand that they can go hand in hand, but to say that everyone who has anxiety is depressed, well, that would be an incorrect statement. Growing up, I've dealt with anxiety, but unfortunately, I didn't know what I was struggling with. I can look back now and see specific times in my life where anxiety had a huge grip on me. But since I couldn't put a name to it, I just thought that something was wrong with me. I grew up in an amazing Christian home. I had parents who loved and supported me, and I had friends all around me. Life should have been great. No worries in the world, but that's not the way I felt on the inside. I got really good at wearing a mask, which was a smile, and that smile wouldn't let people in to see the real me. I know that part of this stems from my personality and the fact that I'm a perfectionist. I get that. I will only allow people to see what I want them to see. Everyone saw that my life was great, filled with family, friends, kind of like that perfectly positioned Instagram post where you see this beautifully clean house that's organized, but what you don't see is about 10 feet away. What's not pictured is a complete mess. Well, that's really a good example of how my life was growing up. My Instagram post would look like a perfectly placed picture of me and my friends sitting around a concrete table, laughing and eating ice cream at one of our favorite places, Polyfreeze, which is a local mom and pop shop that was like a hangout spot in my small town. But on the inside, I felt like I wasn't enough. And at times it felt as though the world was crumbling underneath my feet. I couldn't live up to the perfect standard I was setting up for myself. To add to my anxiety, growing up in church, I felt as though, quote unquote, good Christians weren't depressed. If somebody is struggling with mental health issues and they were told to pray harder or have more faith, how do you think that would make them feel? Well, let me answer that for you. It makes them feel worse. And for me, I hid what I thought I was dealing with because if I admitted it, well, it would be confessing that I wasn't perfect, which in turn would mean I wasn't a good Christian and my faith was lacking. And that probably would have caused my figurative house of cards to crumble. During this time, I struggled with the feeling that something was internally wrong with me and that I was the only one going through this. Now, let me drop a side note right here, because if this is you and how you're feeling, I want you to know that you are not alone and you're not the only person to feel this way or to be in the situation you're in. You see, that was the lie that I believed, and it tore me up on the inside to the point that these thoughts crossed my mind. Like, would anyone miss me if I was gone? Or God must have messed up when he made me. I had this feeling that I was replaceable, that I was the exception, even though I knew deep down that I was a child of God and He created me in His own image and for a purpose. But I struggled with trusting in His promises because I didn't understand why I was feeling the way I was. It was about 6 years ago, I think, that mental health, at least I recognized it, started getting more traction. And it became more socially acceptable to the general public to start a conversation about it. This was the moment that I came to the realization that the majority of my childhood, like all of it, I in fact had dealt with anxiety. It was like a light bulb turned on over my head and made a ding as it lit up. The memories that flooded my mind of past events, and it was almost like I had a sigh of relief that I was now able to put a name to the struggle. I even remember a time when I was probably about 10 years old, and I was riding a bus to my grandma's for after school. Now, my social anxiety doesn't allow me to say when something's wrong or someone's done something wrong. So as we were riding this bus, my bus driver, Sue, she was getting ready to pull up to my grandma's house. So I grabbed my backpack and I started to stand up when all of a sudden she didn't stop. Drove right past my grandma's house. So I just sat back down. Now, I didn't go to my grandma's every day after school. Some days I went to her house. Some days I rode a different bus to my house. So it wasn't uncommon for her to pass by the stop. But typically I wasn't on the bus. When we got to the next stop, and we live out in the country, so that was not like super close to my grandma's, she realized I was on the bus and asked me, "Why didn't you let me know? Why didn't you get my attention?" And I just responded with, I don't know. But in my mind, I thought, well, I didn't want to make you feel bad for missing the stop. And I didn't want to distract you while you were driving, because if I distracted you, then it could cause you to wreck the bus and people would get hurt and it would all be my fault. Now, if you don't struggle with anxiety, you just got a small glimpse into how the mental train can run off the tracks real quick. I'm so glad that I had the nicest bus driver, because she walked me through what we would do. She said she would finish the route, then swing back around to drop me off at my grandma's. And today I understand that my anxiety was in full force on that bus ride. But man, was I scared as a little kid, because I didn't understand what was going on inside my head. It wasn't until a few years ago that I began reading more about anxiety and what it looked like for me, because we have to realize that anxiety will hit everyone in different ways. And then after some hesitation, I finally went and talked to a counselor. But that was the turning point of my life. I talked about the mess of life, like the messy side of that Instagram post, that I was so scared to talk about or share with anyone. And then with some hard work, we were able to find some tools that I can use to help manage my anxiety. Some of those tools are breathing techniques, music. I love music, so that helps calm me down. Recognizing and removing myself from high anxiety situations if it's possible. Weighing the things I can control next to the things I can't control. Those are just a few of the tools to help me manage it. And I do mean manage it, because anxiety will always be with me. As my counselor says, I'm not going to put God in a box. I mean, He has the ability to take my anxiety away, but He hasn't. But if that would have happened, I wouldn't have learned the lessons I've learned. And I wouldn't be the person I am today. I probably would have never started my blog or this podcast talking about mental health. I would have never become a mental health coach so that I can help others who are struggling, and so on and so forth. You get the picture. So yeah, I've learned anxiety isn't always negative. I've actually been able to use my anxiety in positive ways to push me into things like I just mentioned, and to do them with excellence, while at the same time reminding myself that it doesn't have to be perfect. So if throughout this podcast you hear me stumble over words or get tongue-tied, you'll know why I left that in. Because the majority of the time, the real, authentic me is so much better than one that has been over-edited to the point where it's not me anymore. So thanks for joining me on this journey. I'm not 100% sure where we're going, but sometimes it's not about the destination. It's about the people you meet along the way. Thanks for listening to Real Talk with Megan. Remember, you are not alone. Seeking help is a sign of strength, and taking care of your mental health is just as important as taking care of your physical health. We'll see you next time for more honest conversations.